Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Amen. Okay, we are ready to go. And we are on Kuf Omer Aleph at the dot. Omer Rabbi Yosy.
Yosy, all okay?
Yes, everything was just sorted out. Thank you. Sorry for the alarm.
No, what happened? Just tell me quickly.
I wasn't able to log in. I was losing internet, so I reset the switch and it started working.
Okay, Seder.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Omer Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. Moedim Chachamim l'Rabbi Eliezer. We just had a machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer if you could make a kinyan on a piece of property by walking its length and its width. The Chacham said you cannot. You need to make a chazaka. Rabbi Eliezer said no. If you walk its length and its width, it's a good chazaka. So Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina said, "Moedim Chachamim l'Rabbi Eliezer b'shvil shel kramim." If you were on a little path in between the vines in the vineyard, there's no use for that path other than walking. You don't plant it, you don't cultivate it, you don't build fences, so you can't do the standard chazaka. So there, even the Chachamim agreed that just walking the path will be a chazaka to be koina hoil v'nasa lehiluch, since that's all it's made for, to walk. Nikna behiluch, you can be koina by one. They came to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ami, and what they came to him for, the Rashbam says, either someone told his friend that he's selling him a shevil shel kramim, so the question is how much is included, or the Rach said it's speaking where someone had a shevil shel kramim in someone's kerem, we didn't know exactly where it is, so the owner of the kerem has to give a path to this fellow, and he could pick where it is. So when you give it to him, Havulei kihecha the dori tuna dishavishta v'hader. You have to give him enough width in this aisle that even if he's carrying a big package on his shoulders, he'll be able to turn around with it, and the walls on either side won't impede it. That's how wide the path has to be. But loya moran, the only time we say it needs to be that wide to allow me to turn around with a big parcel on my back is elo de Messiah mechitza. If there's high walls, so I'm going to bang into a wall, or my load will bang into a wall. Avaloi Messiah mechitza. What if there was no walls? It was just vines, and your shoulders and the package on them would be above the level of those vines. So now you could turn around easily, even if the path is very thin, because there's no walls there. So therefore, in such a case, you just have to have enough space to be able to walk, just for your footsteps, and you don't need any more than that, because you could still carry a load, because there's no obstruction up high to block. I tell somebody I'm selling you a path through my property, a derech hayochet. So Zok the Mishnah, you have to give him a path that's 4 amas wide. Where did that size 4 amas come from? So a loaded donkey takes up 4 amas wide, so it can walk down that path. Omar Buna Allah is like a cherem, that it's not dalat amas. It's not dalat amas. It's only Kadesh Yavar Chamor B'Masai, which is less than dalat amas, and if the pasuk like the cherem, not like our mission. Okay, Dayane Goyla Oimrim, Dayane Goyla, which is Shmuel and Karna, they say Shnei Gemadim Umechza, 2 amas, 2.5 amas. There's a try if it's a full size amma or if it's a small amma, but whatever it is, Valmar Afuna Locha Kadayane Goyla. So how could Rav Huna say we pass like a cherem, Kadesh Yavar Chamor B'Masai, and then turn around and say Alocha Kadayane Goyla that it's 2.5 amas? V'Amar Rav Huna Alocha Kacherem. Zok Gemara, it's not a stira. Idi v'idi chat shiru. That's exactly what Rav Huna is saying. We pass like a cherem who says Chamor B'Masai. We pass like the Yana Goyla. That what is Chamor B'Masai? How wide is a path you need? 2.5 amas. Derech harabim. What if I sell somebody a derech harabim in my rishos? To loch is sheish esrei yama. You have to give him a road that's 16 amas wide. Tanu rabbanon. Derech hayochid arba amos. Derech me'ir le'ir. So this is not a derech harabim, but it's not a derech hayochid. It's something in the middle. It's a derech me'ir le'ir. And what this is it's a city. It's a road that runs from one city to another city, but there's no entrances or exits off this road. The only place it goes is from one city to the other city. So therefore, only traffic from each city would be on it. So basically, all it is a 2-lane highway. Therefore, you need Shmoina Amos, because if 4 Amos is a Derech HaYochid, which is enough for one lane, being that we have a road that's going from one city to the other, there's 2 lanes, so that the people can go simultaneously in either direction. Turning on to Kluf on the page. Derech HaRabim. What if it's a Derech HaRabim? That's much bigger. That's Sheish Esrei Amo, like our Mishnah says. Derech Orei Miklot, the road to an Orei Miklot. So if I say I'm selling you a road in my property that it's as wide as the road going to Orei Miklot, it's Shloishim Ushtayim Amos. It's 2 times the width of Rosh Hashanah. Where do you get this from? That the road, the approach road to the Orei Miklot has to be such a wide road. Amarfuna, Maikara, where you see it in the pasuk. The pasuk says, prepare a road to go to the Orei Miklot. But it could have said Tochin L'cha Derech, prepare a road. Why Haderech? What's that extra? Hey, Derech Haderech, to tell you that you double up. It's not 1 road, it's 2 roads. Derech HaMelech ein lo shir. The Mishnah says Derech HaMelech, there's no shir because a melech could break and bust and push everything out of his way to go wherever he wants. Why is that? Shamelech put together, lasos lo derech, ve'ein mamachem biyodei, no one can protest. So that's why Derech HaMelech ein lo shir. The Mishnah also said Derech HaKever ein lo shir. And the Rishbam says that even though it's the same wording as the Derech HaMelech, it's not quite the same. A melech can barge through your property and take over any property he wants. Derech HaKever just means when people are on the way to a levaya, even if they're infringing on people's property, the owner of the property can't throw them off. So of course they don't keep it permanently, but they get to walk through his field and even stand on his crops as they're walking through. But that just for the period of levaya. Why? Mishum Yakar the Shilcha, because it's covered a mace that people should be able to go to the levaya and they shouldn't be impeded. Hamaimid. A maimid is a place that you either gather the available, the family gathers after the levaya, or could be the place where they say Hespedim. Dayani Tzipuri Amri Bas Dalet Kabin. It's Bas Dalet Kabin, which we said it was 80 amas by 80 in a bit amas by 80 in a bit amas. Tony Rabbanan. Hamoichik Kforoi Derech Kforoi. Either he sold his caver, someone sold his caver. Now a caver, most families had a family plot that was very personal, and it's considered very humiliating if you don't have a family plot. It's like you're homeless in the next world. So therefore, what if someone needed the money and he sold his plot? Or Derech Kvarei, he sold the approach. Or Mokam Emodoi, the place where people would gather. Or Ubeis Hespedoi, the place where they would say the hesped. The halach is the sale can be reversed. Boin b'nei mishpacha, v'kayver noishal karchai. They can go to the lekach and say, we're taking this caver back. And of course, they have to refund the purchase price. Why could they do that? Mishum p'ka mishpacha. As the Rishbam says, G'nayu lahem. It's a terrible G'nai she'ein l'krayv v'makom kfura, where there's no makom kfura. Hilchach Amar Rabbanan, the Rabbanan said, Lishkel dami v'lahader. They can pay back the money and they can take it back. Okay, Zakti Marvati, Taner Rabbanan, Ein Parchsen Mishiva Maimadois Umashavois Lames. Now we know when we take the oren from the hearse to the burial place, we stop 7 times and we say Yosy v'Seiser. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about on the way back from the caver, the Avelim stopped 7 times. And it says, Ein Parchsen Mishiva Maimadois Umashavois Lames. Why 7? Keneged Hevel Avolim Omar Koheles, Hevel Avolim Akoil Havel. So you have 7 Hevels. 1, Hevel. Havolim is 2 and 3. Hevel is 4. Havolim is 5 and 6. And Akoil Hevel is number 7. What does Hevel Avolim have to do with coming back from Elavaya? Zog Rashbam, Mishivim Amadish and Mashavish, the Chazirosan in a caver, when the family comes back from the caver, they go for a couple of steps. And they sit down, Lenachem Ovel, either to be Menachem Ovel, or Laharbo Tsar Alames, or to stop and absorb what just happened, which creates Tsar, Shemes that he died, Ulaharbis Bebechi, and induce crying. The loss is Ish Eliboy, loss of Bishachuva. It's a time where people could ponder that we have mortality, and therefore we got to do tshuva. Ki chaye ha'odom hevel, because the life of a person is hevel. And that's why that's to do with the pasuk at the beginning of Kahelis of Hevel Avolim. They go out, they stand up, they take a couple of steps, and they sit down. Kach oisin zayin pom, do this 7 times. They losses alibam to absorb shechaye ha'odom hevel. Okay, behind the Kamafarish Lakamei, that's why the Gemara tells us it's connected Shiva Hevel Avolim Sheksuvim Bereish Sefer Kahelis Kain Nira Hatam. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. How exactly do we do this? Like we looked at the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda told us to be Yehuda. In Yehuda, this was the minhag. They wouldn't stop any less than 7 times. And the way it would go is Kagoin, the Chavikish would say, Imdu Yikarim Amoidu, stand up, my Tayir Avelim. Shavu Yikarim Shu, sit down, my Tayir Avelim. Omuloi, they told him, if it's just about standing up and sitting down, and there's no spadim and there's no veilus there, then Pashtus, this should be mutter to do on Shabbos. Now, I don't know when you're ever burying on Shabbos, but that's going to come out a little soon. Achsei de Rami Bar Papa, having the Siva.
Isn't moving a mess, you're not allowed to.
There's no mess here. The mess is buried. Now it's just the people coming back. So the sister of Rami Bar Papa was married to Reb Avia. So Reb Papa and Reb Avia were brothers-in-law. Shchiva, she died. Rami Bar Papa's sister died. So Avad Lamaimid, Reb Avia wanted to make covet for his late wife. So he made a Maimid Moshev. He made this procession on the way back from the Beit Forest. Rabbi Yosef commented that Reb Avia made multiple mistakes here. Ta Batarti, he made 2 mistakes. His first mistake was Ta. The meaning is you only do this with people who are part of the family, even though they're not the actual Avelim, but they're still from the close family. They participate in this Mamad Moshe, not just the grand public. And he did it even with the grand public. First mistake. Second mistake is V'tah. You only do it on the day of the Kfura. He did it the next day after the Kfura. He made these my mothers. I'm not sure exactly where he did it. Abaye said, he made a third mistake. You only do this by the basic forest. So Taka was the next day after the Kfura, and he made some type of walk where everyone stopped 7 times. It wasn't even in the basic forest. And Rav Amar, he made a 4th mistake. In that city where Rav Avia's wife died, it wasn't a minute to do it. And he did it anyway. Amuloi, the Chachamim told Rav Yehuda, Imkein af Shabbos muter lasiskin. Basically, if you're just standing and sitting, there's no hespedim going on, and there's no mess there, it should be muter to do on Shabbos. The problem is, the Arit the basic forest uvayoim aleph, if you're going to say that you only do this in the basic forest, and you only do it on the day of the Kfura, basic forest b'Shabbos my boy. What is the Chum saying? According to you, you could do it on Shabbos. You couldn't do it on Shabbos because you don't bury people on Shabbos. So how would it be negayah to ever do something like this on Shabbos? And for the Gemara, what if they buried somebody late Friday afternoon and the family was coming back to a city that was close, so they were able to get there within the Ben Hashmoshes period, and then it got night and it's Shabbos already? There, that's what it means you could do it on Shabbos. Not in the basic forest in the city. But since it's close enough to the basic forest, it still falls within the it's considered like the basic forest. What if somebody sells land to his friend to make a kever? Now, a kever wasn't just a single grave, it was a whole set of plots for the family. And it was in a very specific arrangement, as we're going to see. Or what if I own a piece of property and hire a contractor to make a family plot for me? What exactly is the layout and construction of this plot? So the first thing is you create a cave. You got to dig under the ground. You got to dig probably about 8 amas under the ground. And then you tunnel horizontally then you tunnel horizontally to make a chamber. The chamber is going to be 4 amas or 8 feet high, and the chamber is going to be 4 amas wide by 6 amas deep. In this chamber that's 4 wide and 6 deep, you were able to put 8 kvarim. Now the kvarim were not buried in the ground. The kvarim were in the walls of this cave. So we'll call them, the art will call them recesses. So the mace wouldn't be buried under the ground, he would be slid into a hole in the wall. How would they set it up? Shalosh mikan. On the wall that's 6 amas long, each wall held 3 kvarim, and the back wall, which was 4 amas wide, was shnayim mikanegda. Now, how big were each of these recesses? The kuchin orkon arba amos. They were 4 amas deep, so deep enough so a person could fit in it completely. For rumain shava, they were 7 tefach, which is 1 tefach more than an amma. And even though a person could fit into an amma, they left a tefach empty so that it would create an oil within that kuch, and the tumah would not be bekas v'oila, so someone walking above would not become tumah. And v'roch von shisha, it was an amma wide. That was the kuch. Now let's have a look. If you have a kuch that's an amma wide, and you have a wall that's 6 amas long, so let's see how they broke it up. The way they broke it up is there's 3 kuchen on the 6 amma wall. So 3 amas are taken up by the kuchen, and now we have 3 extra amas. What did you do with those 3 extra amas? In between each kuch, there was an amma. So now we have already 5 amas spoken for. So amma recess, amma wall, amma recess, amma wall, amma and then amma recess. And now you've used up 5 amas, and now there's 1 amma left. So there was a half amma between the first kuch and 1 wall, and a half amma between the last kuch and the last wall. Those were the long walls. The short wall was 4 amas wide, and it only had 2 kuchen in it. So let's see how to split it up. The 2 kuchen and the amma in between is 3. You're left over 1 extra amma. Again, the half amma here and the half amma here. That's how the Rabbanan hold the grave was structured. But Reb Shimon Aimer, there were a lot more graves than that. Oisa, Toicha, Myra, Sheish Amas al Shmoina. So it wasn't 4 by 6, it was actually 6 by 8. So there's a lot more room or more kvarim. And therefore, rather than just having 8 kvarim, 8 kuchen in this small cave, they were able to fit 13 kuchen into this larger cave. What was the layout? Arba mikan, the arba mikan. So the calculation is simple. If you have a wall that's 8 amas long, you put in 4 kuchen. The 4 kuchen with the walls in between is a total of 7 amas, and then a half amma on either side. And the wall that was 6 amas, you could fit in 3 kvarim. 3 kvarim plus the walls in between is 5, and then a half amma on either side. Where did you get? So that's basically 6 plus, 4 plus 4 plus 3. 8 and 3 is 11. Where's the 13? The echad miyamin pesach ve'echad min asmar. One on the right side of the door and one on the left side. We'll see what that is soon. Now, the oisa chotzer al pia myra. So let's say you dig down here to make 1 myra. The land right in front of that myra was a chotzer, which means it was flat land, ground, solid ground, that was not excavated at all. Now, when you came out of the hole, you went 6 amas across the grass on the surface, and then they drilled another hole, and they made another parallel cave identical to the first one, opposite the first one. So basically, there was a plot of land that was 6 amas by 6 amas. On one end of it was 1 cave, and on the other end of it was the other cave. So why do they need that flat area of 6 by 6? Because that's the amount of space they would need for the people carrying the mace. And there were 2 caves in it, as I described. Achas mikan v'achas mikan. So you have a square property that's 6 by 6, and on the east wall you could drill a hole, dig down, and get into 1 kuch. And on the west wall you drill a hole and get into that other kuch. Shimon said there was not only 2 kuchs, there were only 2 caves, There were 4 caves. Arba la'arba richaisa. 4 caves on each side. So if you think about it, if Reb Shimon said there was 13 per cave, so the whole complex had 13 times 4, which is 52 caves, right? Masha Enkein, the Tanakama, who says it's only 52 kuchen, so you could bury 52 people there. But according to Chachamim, that was only 3, 3, and 2. So you're putting 8, so it was only 16. It was 2 times 8. So Reb Shimon said each one had 13, plus there were 4 on either side of the square, while the Chachamim say there's only 8 per cave, and there's only 2 caves on only on 2 sides, not on 4 sides. Now, according to the Chachamim, people who wanted to come to the grave, they don't want to become Tamei, could walk over the Chatzar. The Chatzar didn't have any mason underneath it. According to Reb Shimon, it's more complicated because you have graves all the way around. So you'd have to go in between the graves, like we do in the basic forest, right? Okay, but there was an amma in between. Right? It's not like our basic forest that they're tight. There was an amma in between. Yeah. Okay, Reb Shimon Gamliel Aimer hakoy lefi hasela. There's no rules because you might have very soft soil. You try digging out this kuchen, the pleat's going to collapse. So you might have to make much fewer. Or you might have really strong soil. You might be able to have less than the nama in between the kuchen. You might be able to squeeze in an extra place. It all depends on the topography. Is topography a good word to describe underneath the soil? Okay. We call it, or it's actually the overburden. It's called the overburden. Right. So the ground, the first like 50 to 100 feet is called overburden. It's called overburden. That's what the earth is called. Because when we drill to do geothermal, we drill through the overburden and down further. Because we go through the overburden, through the aquifers, into the corish. Because we can go up to 400 feet deep. Dr. Gemara Hani Trey, they once hit gas, and there was a bad gas explosion. And they made a lot of laws about how you could drill. Because natural gas has no smell. That we smell it's odorized at the distributor. But natural gas has no smell. So they were drilling in Oakville, a geothermal well. They went to 400 feet. They had no idea there was gas coming out. And there was such a bad explosion. It was really bad. So they made a lot of strong regulations on drilling. It was natural gas. No, it was natural gas.
Trapped it.
Yeah, trapped down there. And when they did it, they released it. Okay. So you never know what you're going to find there. I always tell my customers when I drill for them geothermal that if we hit an oil well, they get to have half of it. Okay. But we never hit a body. Hani Trey. I even did work for an Italian and I still didn't find a body. Hani Trey lahecha shadim. These extra 2 kfarim that Reb Shimon says you can squeeze out of a ma'ira, where do you put it? Right? The Mishnah says one on the right side of the door, one on the left side. But where exactly? Ila baroi, if they imagine you walk in the door and there's a wall on either side of you. So you're walking in the door, it's in a 4-amma wall. There's a wall on either side of you. So if you're going to drill a kuch backwards behind me, that means that kuch is going to be sticking out underneath the chutzner. Which means if you're walking on the chutzner, you're walking on the grave. The whole purpose of the chutzner was people can gather there. There's another problem. Because we learned, chutzner hakever ha'imid b'saychei tar. If you stand on the chutzner kever, you're tar. But if you're going to tell me that according to Reb Shimon, there were 2 kuchen that were underneath the chutzner, you're going to have a big problem. There's other problems, Taishva says. You know what other problem you're going to have? If on all 4 sides they're drilling in to the chutzner, they're going to bang into each other, right? But that's an issue that the Gemara discusses later. So Amar Yosy bar Chinina, you know what they did? The Ovid Lahu Kiminaker. Maybe they didn't bury these 2 people lying down. Maybe they buried them standing up. So they only had a hole, amma by amma, and they sort of dropped the mason. They buried the mess standing. Correct, Gemara, how could you say they buried the mess standing? Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, turning on to Kavala from the base, that Kfuras Chamorim. That's how you bury a donkey, or that's how you bury an ass. You bury him standing up. A human you don't bury that way. So Zok Gemara, if it's Kfuras Chachamizu, so the Rabbi Yochanan, you know how Rabbi Yochanan hold you couldn't bury somebody standing up. You know how he would do it? The Odu Bekeren Zavis. He did it Bekeren Zavis. What does Bekeren Zavis mean? What does Bekeren Zavis mean? So there's actually 2 pshatim. One pshat is like in the picture over here. So you could see diagonally on the right wall. So instead of it being drilled into the wall that you come into the cave through, it's on the far wall, diagonally this way, and diagonally that way. There are others who learn that what it means is you put it right over here in the corner, right over here in the corner. The problem is, Frank, you don't have enough room, right? Frank the Gemara, how could it be that nogi kuchen ladodi? So if you learn it's over here, the complaint is that these three kuchen are all touching each other at the front. It's not separate enough. If you learn that it was over here, it's obvious. This is only a half amma. If you're going to dig a amma hole in here, it's going to literally join to the other hole. And for the Gemara, Amar Abashi b'mamek, who said you put it at the same level of height? You could make it lower, so therefore it will not interrupt. So you might ask, so then why did you make two rows all the way around? You can get so many graves in there. The teretz is it would collapse, but one in the corner is kafel. If you're not going to say that they drill these recesses in at different levels, you're going to have another problem. Arba Myris, Reb Shimon, Hakanogi, Kuchen Ladodi. If you look at Reb Shimon, you're going to have a massive problem. Because here, let's go back to this picture. These Kuchen, the first two on each cave, is going to be banging in to the two from the cave that's kitty corner with it. So, you have to say that these were drilled deeper, these were drilled higher, so that they were not going to intersect with each other. So, therefore, I have a raya that it was mamek. How can that be mamek? So, too, when you're talking about the two ones in the corner, they could be drilled at a different height level, so they wouldn't interfere with the existing. Rabbi Yeshua came out with an innovative shot. Omar Arba Myris Reb Shimon the Ovid Lehuki Harusa. Who said that these kuchen come out at a 90-degree angle? Who said that they're perpendicular to the wall of the cave? Maybe they go at an angle, as you see here in the picture, they're coming out at an angle. So this way, the kitty corner units are not going to obstruct each other because they're all going out at a 45-degree angle. And now the Gemara introduces such a geschmacka way of explaining algebra, of explaining geometry, that I'm in love with this Gemara. And this is what I want to do a little bit of a demonstration as to why this cannot possibly work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little koch out of paper.
But even before you get to point to this shot, you lose your corner.
Why would I lose my koch? You doing the far corner koch?
The far corner
No.
is not narrow corner.
No, why would I lose
Get
it?
8. You count. Look at the picture with the angle.
Yeah, but pick another one there because the picture doesn't show it. Doesn't mean anything.
What do you mean? It's only 8 amas, right? We know it's a 4 by.
Yeah, but you could see in between those that are 90 degrees at the top of the picture, and here you could squeeze another one in.
You think that's what he's saying?
Yeah, of course. So Zok the Gemara. So let's say I have over here. I have what? I have over here. I'm going to call this a koch. The problem is that I'm going to call this a koch. This is 1 amma, and this is by 4 ammas. 1 by 4. Let's call this a koch. Okay. Let's call this the cave. If it's coming off at a 90-degree angle, it's not coming through clearly because it's making it black. Because it's trying to block out. Because if it comes out at a 90-degree angle, so then of course the opening will be an amma. And then you could line up the 3 or the 4 along this edge. But if I'm going to put it off at an angle, at a 45-degree angle, so then the opening is not straight across, it's a diagonal. This will be more than an amma. So it will not fit on this wall. It simply will not fit on this wall. Because each of my 4 kochot on each side is no longer an amma. It could be almost an amma and a half because it's hitting it at a diagonal. And that will not fit. So it sounds like a great idea on the picture, but it will not fit. Those kuchen are going to end up being maybe a half an amma wide, and only very skinny people will be buried, and fat people like me will be discriminated against. That's not fair.
They put them sideways.
What?
They put them sideways.
I'm wider sideways than I am lying flat. I'm taller lying on my back than I am standing. So maybe it would have worked. But the Gemara, so that's the way I describe it. The Gemara described the same problem in such a fascinatingly innovative, clear geschmack way. And this is what the Gemara does. It's so geschmack, it's unbelievable. So before we learn the words inside, I want to show you what the Gemara did. What the Gemara did is the Gemara drew a diagonal line from this point to this point, an imaginary diagonal line. Now let's look at this. We know this ma'ira, this cave is 8 amas long. We know this ma'ira is 8 amas long. So I have an 8 amma square and if I have an 8-amma right triangle, and if I draw the diagonal or the hypotenuse, that will be the line that the 8 kuchin, the 4 and 4, will directly intersect at a 90-degree angle. At a 90-degree angle, they're each an amma wide with an amma in between them. So if you have 8 kuchin and there's an amma in between them, that's a total of 8 plus 7 is 15. You have 15 ammas. The problem is this diagonal line is nowhere near 15 ammas. Let's think about it. Let's use our Pythagorean theorem. 8 is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 8 squared is 64. A squared is 64. 64 plus 64 is 128. What is the square root of 128? Let's think about it. 12 times 12 is 144. 11 times 11 is 121. So it's just above 11. So if I only have a line that's 11 ammas, how in the world am I going to get 15 ammas to go through there? The math just doesn't add up. So this was a nice idea, but it's not going to work in the real world. It's a typical engineer's design that when the contractor comes to build, it just doesn't add up. Although they wouldn't make such a bad mistake either. Zok to Gemara, if an engineer watches this, I'm going to lose his business. So no engineers are gewaltig. Zok to Gemara, some wichtig. Kol amso beribua amso trechumshi. So this is it's not an exact formula, the Pythagorean theorem, but it's an estimate. It's approximately an amma and 2/5. Balachsoina, that would be the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So kama havalahu, if you take the 8 by 8 right triangle and you make the hypotenuse using that formula, it's chat shrei v'chumsha. It's 11 and an 8. The problem is, how could you fit 15 amas into 11 and 8? Kuchin kama havu tmanya. There's 8 kuchin. Tmanya b'chat shrei v'chumsha hechem ishkachsla. You simply can't fit 15 amas into 11 amas and a bit. So Ella Hadr Afuna, Bareja Vishua, Berusahi or Bedusahi, it depends how you read it. So if you learn Berusa here, means he might have said this, but he definitely wasn't referring to this price. He was referring to something else. So you're misapplying it and you're confusing it. Bedusa means it's a joke. It's nonsense. And if that's what it means, then it's not going on Afuna Dereja Vishua. Whoever said this over in the name of Yehuda ben Yeshua didn't know what he was talking about. He messed up. So, what are we left with? We're left with the original teretz of Umpka. Some were high, some were low. Or we can have another alternative, that they're all at the same height level and they'll still all fit. How? Like we're going to learn soon from Benifli. We weren't talking about full-size graves. We're talking about graves for babies. Though it don't need to be a nama. So they can go anywhere because they're tiny. Hachanami benifli. So you could pile them on the two corners right where you walk in. They could be beside, they could fit into the half because you make them very, very small. Gewaltig. Tanan Hasan, we learned in a Mishnah. Hamoitzi meish mushkov kedakai noitloi vestevusas. Now look, because what if someone is cultivating his field and he bangs into a mace, there's a mace buried. So normally a mace is kindness but that's only if he was buried there for permanent. What if there was some type of issue, say in the Second World War, where they couldn't bury people, they just buried them wherever they fell temporarily. And eventually they were going to go back and give them a proper kfua. So they were only buried there temporarily, and then they ended up getting left there. Such a mace is not koine mekaymoy, and such a mace can be moved. You could be mefaneh. So what if you want to have tyrus in your field, so you can't have mason? So if you find just one mace, you can assume this is not a burial ground. It's just someone was buried here. So therefore, you take the body out, you take all of the disturbed soil out, and then a 3 tvachim layer of virgin soil. And we learned that from Yosy, who instructed Eden, unisasani mi Mitzrayim. When you leave Mitzrayim, carry me out of Mitzrayim. And we darshan mi Mitzrayim, take some of the earth of Mitzrayim with me. And that's how we know that you take a 3 tefach layer of virgin soil all the way around the mace. Okay. What about Shnaim? What if you find 2? Same thing, Noitlon Vest Fusoson. Again, we'll assume they were just buried here haphazardly. It's not a mokum. But Mota Shloisha, if they found 3, now this might be a basic forest already. So Zok to Gemara, Zok to Mishnah, we know that there's different configurations of what a burial cave would look like. So if they were buried in such a way, in such a pattern where it's consistent with the design of a burial cave, then we have to be choshed that this is a permanent burial and you're not allowed to be befaned. How do you know if it's in that pattern? So before I read this Mishnah, let's think. According to the Rabbanon, if you had 3 within 4 amas, right? Or 2 within 2 amas, or 2 within, I'm sorry, if you had 3 within 6 amas and 2 within 4 amas, that would be a sign of a kever. According to Reb Shimon, if it was 6 within 8 amas and 3 within 6 amas, it would be right. But the Mishnah doesn't say either one. The Mishnah is between 4 and 8, which means this Tana learned not like Reb Shimon, not like the Rabbanan. They had a third dimension for how the caves were built, and he learned the caves were built 4 amas by 8 amas. So if it's in that pattern, first, you need to be concerned that this might be a real burial ground, and therefore, if it's a burial ground, you can't move them. But if there's a burial ground here, now you need to know where the other farm are in the neighborhood. You can't just assume there's nothing else. If you just found 1 or 2, you can assume there's nothing else. You don't even have to look. You have a cheskes kashrus. But once you see the signs of a burial ground, now you're gonna make sure that there's nothing around. So this is literally like playing Battleship, poking around to see where there's a possibility to have a new grave. So once you know that there's 3 graves together, you have to go in every direction 20 amas, because there might be another grave there that's part of this configuration. What happens if Motza Echad B'Soif Esherman? What if you actually found one after 20 amas? So now we know there's the burial ground there. You got to go further, because you don't know if the second caver you hit, is it the last target on this ship, or is it the new target for the next ship, right? Did you finish the aircraft carrier and now you're working on the submarine? You have no idea. So therefore, you got to go another 20 amas. Why? Because it seems like there's a real burial ground here, and now you got to sort it all out. Now, normally if you find 1 kever, no problem. But here, if you found 1 kever, it's a big problem, because you already found a burial ground. If you found originally 1 kever by itself, no problem. But now you have a glaimodover because you already found 3 in the configuration of a burial ground. Now any single kever you find, we're going to attribute that it's part of the burial ground. That's what the Brasha says. So Amar Mar me arba bat shmoy. Correct the Gemara. Mani irabanan ha'amri dalet al sheish. It's 4 by 6. Irab Shimon ha'amar sheish al shmoy. So Gemara, you know what? It's a third shita. It's a third shita, but it's really in Rab Shimon. There's a machloikis tanoim what Rab Shimon said. Our Mishnah says Rab Shimon holds it's 6 by 8, but this Brayta says in Rab Shimon that it's 4 by 8. Lo Rab Shimoni by Tana, who is going according to different Tana. The Tanya Matan Ritzufin the Ein Beineyan Midal Rames Atches Yeshlan Tfus. What if you found 10 bodies in a period of 8 amas? That's not a kever. A kever would have a maximum of 4 bodies, right? So if you have them 2 condensed together, we say it's tfusa, and you could exhume them. The Ein Lunchchun is kvar. Right? Obviously, it was a mass grave that people were buried there temporarily, and they were eventually going to relocate them to proper Bakavatika graves. Rab Shimon ben Yehuda, I remember Rab Shimon. No, if you have 10 in a period in the span of 8, you don't assume it was a mass grave. You know what you assume? It was a regular, proper, basic forest, and they had an emergency. They took some extra mason and they shoved them in later. But really, there is a burial ground here. There's a burial ground that was also added to temporarily, and therefore you have to treat it like a burial ground. You make believe like the ones that are in the middle, not in the right positions, as part of the proper layout, as if they weren't there. In other words, because they might have been added later on an emergency basis, on a temporary basis. And the rest could be mitzaref midal ramas vatches. So that's the brayso. So you're telling me it's going according to Reb Shimon, who holds it's 4 by 8. If it's 4 by 8, you have to understand where did the brayso said you measure 20 amas. Why do you measure 20 amas? Because let's start at the end of 1 8-amma cave, right? We're at the end of 1 8-amma cave, right? So there's actually a discussion in Tosfos, when you put the bodies into the cave, is it head first or is it foot first? So let's say it was foot first, right? So you measure from the guy's foot, right? Which would be the entrance to the cave, the back wall. And if you count 8 amas, you're going to get to the chutzner. If you count another 6 amas, you're going to cross the chutzner. 6 of it is 14. And then you got to go to the other end. If you go another 8 amas, that's 22 amas. It's not 20. So according to Reb Shimon, it's not 20 amas, 22 amas. So how do you get 20 amas? Now, when you're checking 20 amas, the response is very clear. You don't just make one hole 20 amas. You check along the way, and you got to check on either side, because if you're going down, there's 2 sides of this cave, right? So it doesn't just mean 20 amas. It means 20 amas every possible combination. But whatever the case is, it should be 22 if we're working with Reb Shimon. Makim to Reb Shimon, name is Seifa, Boyde Kemenu Lahal Esrim Ama Mani. Reb Shimon, it would be Esrim B'Tarta Abim. And the Rabbanon, if it's going to Rabbanon, then it's 6, 6, and 6. So the Rabbanon, Tam Nisrael, it's only 18. So according to who would 20 be the right amount? Let's say the Bryce is going according to Rabbanon, which in and of itself is very difficult. Because let's go back to the Bryce and we'll see it doesn't make sense. Because first the Bryce says, that's clearly Reb Shimon. And now when the Bryce goes on, suddenly changed to the Rabbanon without announcing it, very, very difficult to say, but that is what the Gemara is saying. So where do you get 20? It should be 18. The first cave, you didn't make a straight line because we're afraid. Where would you make the straight line? From where you found the guy's foot, right? Well, what if the next guy was short? And then the other guy was short. What if the next 4 guys were short? They're still there, but you won't find them. So therefore, they want you to go to the diagonal, so you're cutting across everything, and hopefully you'll be able to run into more people.
They added 2 amas to make sure.
But no, since you're doing it on the diagonal, the hypotenuse, if you have a 6 by 4 right triangle, the hypotenuse, let's do the math. 6 times 6 is 36. 4 times 4 is 16. 36 plus 16 is 52. Right? 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. So it's 7 and a bit. So we're calling it 8. We're calling it 8. So therefore you have 8, 6, and 6. That's exactly 20. Break the Gemara, I don't understand. If the first cave you're going through on a diagonal because you want to make sure to cover anything, so the second cave you should go through on a diagonal as well. You're more worried on the first cave than on the second cave. And once again, you're back to 22 again.
When you found that guy at 20, you could go.
No. You're measuring. You want to say you're measuring 20. Why? Because the first cave you go through on a diagonal, which is really 8 amas. Then you go straight through the chutzner, and then you go straight through the next cave. Maybe the next cave you also go through. You have to also go through the diagonal. For the same reason you would go through the first cave on the diagonal, you should go through the second cave on the diagonal. If you're close to the bodies are not in a straight line, then you got to go on the diagonal. So then you get 22. So you're right back where we started from. We're not going to be so much. The first one we're going to check, but assume that in 2 caves there's different sized people, and you're not going. That's already more of a chashash that we need to be choshev. So I want to stop here for a second because we all were struggling with this. There's a machlokes in the Mishnah what your typical cave is. What is the machlokes? I mean, see what most people do. How could you have a machlokes? It must be that a very significant portion of the people built it this way, and it's a 3-way. So it might be like a third of the people built it 4 by 8, a third of the people built it 6 by 8, and a third of the people built it 4 by 6. And the Tanaim are saying, what is, when a guy says stam, what model is he referring to, right? But the problem is, when you're digging for a lost grave over here, you don't have to be choshev for one configuration. You should be choshev for all 3. There's 3 types. So we couldn't understand it. So I'm suggesting, and I don't know if it's a good svara, maybe pshat is, we're not looking to be machmer. There's a cheskes heter on this piece of property because there was no known graveyard. If you found one,
the guy.
yes, you found one, so we're makbid, right? So you found 3, and we know there's a graveyard, so we're makbid. You should check. But who said we're so makbid to check every single configuration? Maybe they wanted to make. Well, first of all, it's very damaging to find the graveyard on your property. You lost its value. You have asked for Kedusha protesting every move you make in there, right? So maybe Chazal weren't so makbid. They don't want to be mafsed people's karkois. So they each picked the one that's the most popular version. That's a check for it. But don't check for all these different things because don't ask for trouble. I don't know if it's a boik svara, but otherwise I'm struggling with if each of the models are relatively common, so why wouldn't you have to be choshev for them? let's see the Gemara back. Rav Shisha Barei Davidi Omar. No, what is Rav Shimon? Let's say it's Rav Shimon. We just learned Rav Shisha Barei Davidi. We talked about the baby navels. So maybe it's Rav Shimon going to Rav Shimon. So what's the problem? The problem is according to Rav Shimon, it's 8 plus 6, which is 22, right? One of the two caves was made for babies, and therefore it wasn't 8, it was only 6. Because they used to make caves to bury babies, that was only 6. So now you have 6, 6, and 8, which is exactly 20. Frank the Gemara, I don't understand. If one half of the chutzner was nefalim, maybe the rest was nefalim, and then there's only tamas rav, and it's back to 18. So tomorrow, no, chadav and nifli amrinon. I mean, you're not going to build your whole burial ground with nefalim. There's a certain amount. It's not, the mortality rate isn't so high. It's enough if you had those 6 firm or whatever with nefalim, and the rest would be for fully grown mason. Barami derabbanan adarabbanan, barami derabshimon adarabshimon. On Omar Aleph, we discussed a case where in the 8 amis, instead of having 4 mason and 5 mason, you had 10 mason. It was overcrowded. And there was a difference of opinion how to approach it. The Chum said, this can't be a grave. Can't be a permanent grave. Jim said, maybe it could be. Maybe it was done properly and they added more later. We have a stira because, in fact, the Rabbanan Reb Shimon, in a different halacha, similar, took the opposite position. So, Varami the Rabbanan, the Rabbanan, Varami the Reb Shimon, the Reb Shimon. The Tanan we learned, the Mishnah. And we learned this Mishnah before. Kerem hanatua al pachas me arba amis. A kerem is only a kerem if there's 4 amis in between the rows, because then you could bring your rig in between the rows of the vines to harvest them, to service them. If the rows are less than 4 amis, then the whole thing is osid lak, or you're tearing it out. So it doesn't have the shem of a kerem because it can't have kim. It's not a permanent installation. So it's the two pachas of Shimon Omer ain't a kerem. It's not a kerem because it's going to be torn out. What do you mean? Harays a kerem. When you do make believe the center ones aren't there. So here by kerem, the Chum say, yeah, you make believe like the extra one is removed. But when it came to the Mason, he didn't say that. And Reb Shimon by the Mason says it, and here he doesn't say it. So kasha the Rabbanan, not the Rabbanan, the kasha the Reb Shimon, not the Reb Shimon. Zaktamar, it's not fair at all. Once you think about it, they're very different. Well, you're going to agree with it because you're going to see the Gemara's, whatever you're thinking is what the Gemara is going to add. The Reb Shimon, not the Reb Shimon, loy kasha, because the Bach changes the order. So let's look at the Bach inside. Reb Shimon, the Shimon, loy kasha, hacha zimnin the misramalei bein hashmoshash umikru umanchalei. Sometimes it's bein hashmoshash, and they didn't have time to bury the people properly, so they'll dump them in a place for a temporary, and they're going to take them out later. However, but when you're talking about vines, loy nati, no one's going to lechatchila plant loy nati inish adai teleoker. No one's going to plant the configuration where they know for sure they're going to have to uproot them. It doesn't make sense. Burying, sometimes you're in an emergency, you can bury someone. So there's no comparison between the two. That remembers the territory between Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon. The Rabbanan, nami lekash. Hacha, by a mace, they would never do something like that. Even the minville loy mikri kever. Being that it's messy and mias, we cannot consider the cave. But by the vines, someone would plant it that way. You know what? Also, Meimar Amar, I'm planting rows close together. Not every single vine ends up being nice. I might have a bad row. I don't know which one will be the bad row. So let me plant all the rows. And my intention is the bad rows I'll pull out and I'll use them as firewood. I mean, now the shopper, the level of TV. So Baruch Hashem, we were zoich in the village, the 6th parak of Bava Basra. We were carrying a lot of guys. So Bali Neder, Hadin Allah Hamoicha Peiris, Hadin Allah Hamoicha Peiris, Hadin Allah Hamoicha Peiris. Zok to Gemara Baita, Zok to Heilige Mishnah. Ha'omer l'chaverei base kur offer ani moichalach. I'm selling you a base kur of offer. Now, when you say offer, you're not selling him a dump truck load of earth. You're selling him a property that you could plant on. If he said base kur, plain ani moichalach, I can give you a piece of property that's full of rocks that's only good for building skyscrapers. Useless. You can't plant anything there, right? But if you said base kur offer, you're making it clear offer, meaning you'll be able to plant there. So if you said base kur offer ani moichalach, now what is a base kur? The Rashbam shares with us what a base kur is. A base kur is 15 times the size of the Chatzar Mishkan. The Chatzar Mishkan was 50 by 100 amas. This is 15 times that. So it would be 1500 amas by 50, right?
Isn't it how much it produces, base score value?
Yeah, but it's based on that size. It's based on that size.
What is that? What are the dimensions?
If the Chazer Mishkan was 100 by 50, and it's 15 times that, it would be 1500 times 50. So 1500 times 50, let's do this. Let's see how many square feet it is. How many square amas it is. 1500 times 50, 1500 times 50 is 75,000 square amas. So what's the square root of that? We'll figure that out in a second.
Be different kinds of dimensions.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to see if it was this. It would be 274 roughly square amas. It's a pretty big piece of property. It was also known as a chomer. Chomer would be this size property. Right. The reason why chomer and base core is a significant number, we're going to see soon. It's a very important number. Anyway, so someone said, I'm selling you a base core, and in the property, there were areas of land that were dropped by 10 tefachim, or there were rocks that brought up the surface 10 tefachim above. They're not included in the base score. You have to give him those 273 square amas of land that's all on the same level. And the reason for it is, when I buy, I want to be able to put my rig there and plow the whole thing. I don't have to bring a crane in to lower my rig down to the lower level or to raise it up to a higher level. So therefore, if in this property it has those don't count. You got to give him more property. He's got to have 273 base scores that are on the same level. But if it's not 10 tefachim, we consider that flat land, and therefore nimdadani. What if he said, I'm not telling you a base score offer, I'm going to kid base score offer, around the base score offer. So there now, filu how you show him the koyim and mukim yoysim me'asar tvachim. By sloim gavoyim yoysim me'asar tvachim, hare eladim dadima. That is important. Now the halacha is, if you are makdish a field in the time when yovel was relevant, so what we do is the Torah normally a normal thing that you're makdish, you assess its fair market value, and that's what you would have to pay hektish. But the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a break when you're being makdish a field, and the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a prescriptive amount of money you pay per acre. And that's what you pay, which is probably less than the fair market value. And he said, for every chomer so'irim, which basically is a chomer is a base core, right? For every chomer so'irim, you pay 50 shekel for the 49 years. So it works out to 1 shekel on the mashu per year, right? Yeah, it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Zera chomer so'irim 50 shekel. It says you pay 50 shekel for a zera zera chomer so'irim. That's let me see if the Rashbam quotes the pasuk. I think the Rashbam might quote the pasuk over here. The Rashbam says,
it's on.
Oh, you see, the pasuk. Oh, here, yeah. V'misteach chuzaso yaktish ish Lashem v'yerchal ufizari zera chomer so'irim v'chamishim shekel kesef. And the Rashbam says, what is a chomer so'irim? It's the ficheshman shasayim b'chasar mishkan dainu me'al chamishim. We can't say b'chasher levei skur tes vav ha'amim me'al nun shebei skur hu chomer. That is the chomer. So the Torah says if you donate this piece of property, it's 50 shkolim for the 49 years. About Zok the Mishnah. Tanan also. We learned in the Mishnah, Hamak b'shadeu b'shas hayovel, noisen loy, leveis zera chomer so'irim, you give 50 shekel kesef because of the pasuk. What if Hayusham the Kaima Mukim Yutvachim, Aishloim Gabayim Yutvachim, which when the sale wouldn't be included? What about Hektish? Ein Nimdad Nima. They're not counted as part of the field, which means you get the special deal of 50 shekel for the flat land. For those lower lying lands or high lying lands, you got to pay market value, fair market value. Pachas mikan, but if there weren't 10 tefachim deep or not 10 tefachim high, nimdad nima, that gets the same formula. Correct Gemara, even if they're not measured together with the land, but why don't they get the same deal? You know, you just do it according to the ratio. But my lick shubam for nafshai, and let them also get the same deal. Zok Gemara, v'chi tema kivin do I have a base core loy kachi. If you're going to say that they don't become kodesh because they're not a base core, and the Torah specifically says, so you see the Torah is talking about a minimum of a chaymer, and therefore it won't become kodesh. It can be. But Tanya we learned sada. It says in the pasuk, it says yakdish. Oh, okay. It says today. It says today. Matam elomer. Levishanemer zama chaymer soyer mechamishum shekel kesef. Ainly, I would have thought El Shektish Binyan Zeh, Bidafka that amount. Minayin the rabbis, how do you know even smaller pieces of property have the same formula? Lesech, Bechati Lesech, So, Tarkav, Bechati Tarkav. How do you know that all those are also going to be having the same halach of hektish in the same formula? Amaloimer, stay Mikol Makoim. So why don't you give them the same ratio?
Strengthen the kasha.
I'm sorry? Strength the kasha, that's right. And for the Gemara, they're not some lower levels of land that you could plant there. You can't plant there. They're not plantable. There's a little lake in there, a little pond in there. The lav b'nei's rianinu, unless you want to plant seaweed for your sushi, right? They can now prove to you it's not plantable. Because what about the areas that were elevated? How does the Brisa refer to those? How does the Mishnah refer to those? The Ketani Dumi the slime. Rock, you can't plant on a rock. The same way you can't plant on a rock, so the recessed land also was a land that you couldn't plant on because it was full of water. Shema Mina. Okay, should we stop here? This is where I stopped today. And we'll pick up here tomorrow, Bez Hashem. So tomorrow, Shlichus is 6:45. So we'll learn. No, Shlichus is 7:45.
A whole bunch of
Right. The first, the main minion, the 8 o'clock minion is saying Shlichus at 7:45. So we'll learn at 6:45, and we'll learn also after Shachas around 9ish, 9:15, right? So we'll learn twice. The same as usual. Before the 8 o'clock minion, which is clear, you're done at 7:45, and then we'll look 9:15ish usually. Okay, everyone should have a good tavach, a mazel tavach. So we started at almost 9 o'clock. So in 52 minutes we did 3 blocks. Baruch Hashem, only in Bava Basra.
Only in Bava Basra.
Good tavach, all the very best. Yeah, Effie was there, and Bensi was there. Bensi,
I get the ball.
I get your Bensi, your and Effie. I get your. I mentioned your. Bensi, you're going to Eretz Yisrael now, right? Well, and Menachem's going.